um, the folks from Grain Belt Express, and Nicole Lucky, who's the Vice President of Regulatory Affairs with Invenergy, is here to share with us about the status of the project, how things are going, and the value and those type of things. Nicole, how are you?
I'm well, Josh. Thanks for the invitation. I'm so excited to be here today to provide an update on the tremendous economic impact of the Grain Belt Express transmission line project on the state of Missouri. As Josh said, my name is Nicole Lucky. I'm the Vice President of Regulatory Affairs for Invenergy LLC. Although I was an Illinois Commerce Commission staffer in my previous life, so it was really nice to see Chair Zalewski this morning and hear how everyone's faring at ICC. Next slide. So for those of you who aren't yet familiar with our company, Invenergy is headquartered in Chicago and has been developing sustainable energy solutions since 2001. Though our executive team has been working together in the energy space for almost 30 years. Since it was founded, Invenergy has under contract, under construction, or in operation 101 utility scale wind projects totaling more than 15 gigawatts of generation, 36 solar projects totaling almost 4 gigawatts of generation, 16 utility scale battery storage projects totaling 896 megawatt hours and 300 megawatts, and 12 natural gas projects totaling 5.6 gigawatts of generation. So the company is fairly technology agnostic, but of course only developing what makes sense in the market today, which is trending towards a low to no carbon footprint. Invenergy has a couple different arms of the company. You can see here at the bottom of the slide. We have a services arm of the company, which includes a large number of experts. And these are the folks that do the day-to-day operational work for our assets, whether we continue to own them or continue to operate them on behalf of our utility customers. We do also have a clean water arm working on desalination solutions in Texas, and a venture capital arm called Energize Ventures that invests in digital solutions to improve the performance of clean energy technologies. Now, while most folks think of Invenergy as a generation company, we have had to build over 400 miles of high voltage transmission and over 2,200 miles of distribution level transmission simply to interconnect our own projects. So this is part of what made Grain Belt Express a huge company and why I feel so confident in our ability to execute on the project's development. Next slide. So I think it's really important to look at, well, that's definitely not Grain Belt. I think it's really important to look at the project as a whole, right? When we're talking about it, I think a lot of people have seen the route through Missouri, but perhaps not the entire project. This is an 800-mile long high voltage direct current transmission line. It starts in western Kansas, it goes up through Missouri, where it's designed to drop off some of its power, and then continues through Illinois into Indiana, where the remainder of the line power will be delivered into that energy market there called PJM. Next slide. The route as approved by the Missouri Public Service Commission can be seen here. It's routed through 8 Missouri counties. These are the counties that will see the tremendous amount of economic activity and opportunity around the development of the Grain Belt Express project over the next couple of years. Next slide. So the maps depicted on this slide do a really good job of summarizing why Grain Belt Express makes a lot of sense. It's no secret that the best wind resource in the United States is located in western Kansas. And as you can see from the map on the right, actually western Kansas also has a really excellent solar resource. And getting access to the best resource means that you end up significantly lowering the cost of the energy that is produced by your wind or solar project. So if I'm spending the same amount of money on my installed capacity, on my actual equipment, but I'm generating more megawatt hours or widgets or whatever you want to call them, that means each one I generate is less expensive. And in the case of Kansas, the resource is many times more efficient and less expensive than similar resources in Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana. Now, I'll note that in order to decarbonize our electricity system along the timeline that many investors and customers are pushing their utilities to follow, we're going to need these types of projects everywhere via Grain Belt and locally. So this is not an either or proposition, this is an and proposition. But Grain Belt is going to help to significantly lower the cost of that power for ratepayers in states where the energy will be delivered, like Missouri. So the current problem is, because the best renewable resources and the most open land for siting them, because wind and solar resources do require quite a bit of land, are these resources are located far away from population centers, so we have to build transmission lines to access them. The existing infrastructure in these areas, because they're sparsely populated areas, just isn't there. So think of it like building an interstate highway system or new rail infrastructure in the sky. Just like the interstate highway system provides consumers with access to low-cost goods by sourcing them from where they're most cost-effectively produced, like Florida oranges or Pacific Northwest lumber products, transmission like Grain Belt is designed to deliver consumers electricity from where it's most affordably produced. So given the way that joint transmission planning agreements are structured, and we heard Chair Silby talk this morning about some of the efforts on the seams between markets, it would be impossible to see a project like Grain Belt come through traditional RTO planning processes. SVP, MISO, and PJM, the three markets that the project runs through, two of which Missouri is in, have very different transmission planning processes that are inconsistent with different planning assumptions and timelines. Now, there's certainly a push from stakeholders and from federal offices like the DOE for multi-state HVDC projects like this, but to date, that has not resulted in any projects like Grain Belt being built. But we do need to be thinking about this as a country. Having an electricity system that is interconnected and features geographically diverse resources is critical to maintaining the reliability and security of our electricity system, especially as we have more renewable generation coming online. So the sun is not always shining and the wind is not always blowing at the same time everywhere across the country. The more interconnected our system is, the more we have access to these resources when we need them and at the lowest cost. I think I could probably talk on the topic of the need for transmission forever, but I know we want to dig into the economic benefits piece of this project. So stick with me for a little bit longer and we will get into that. Next slide. So why is Grain Belt Express a direct current versus typical alternating current line? Well, this slide mostly speaks for itself, but DC lines are just more efficient at moving large amounts of power long distances, and Grain Belt is designed to carry 4,000 megawatts of generation. You have fewer line losses than you do with AC lines, which again helps to ensure that you're delivering energy at the lowest cost. There are definitely also operational and reliability benefits associated with DC lines versus AC lines. But in addition, DC lines use a narrower right of way and fewer conductors than comparable AC lines, making more efficient use of transmission corridors and minimizing visual and land use impacts, which I know is a priority to the landowners, to local county officials, and to elected officials in those areas. Because the existing system is primarily AC, DC lines require converter stations, which you can see pictured here on this slide, to convert the power from DC to alternating current. Now, this is not a new technology. In fact, DC technology has been around since the inception of our electricity grid. Many folks might already be familiar with the battle between Edison and Westinghouse over AC and DC, but in any case, there are 16 HVDC lines operating in North America today. The Pacific DC intertie between the Pacific Northwest and Los Angeles is probably the most notable in the United States. And there are many more under construction or operating across the world. Next slide. So I wanted to make sure folks understood a little bit of history about the project. Development began back in 2011 under Clean Line Energy Partners, and the project went through extensive rounds of stakeholder meetings, public inputs, and regulatory approvals. So this project's been in the public domain for a long time, and Invenergy stepped in to manage the development of Grain Belt in late 2018 and closed on its acquisition of the project in 2019. So we have now received unanimous regulatory approvals in 3 of the 4 project states, and we're planning to pursue approvals in Illinois in 2021. And I want to be really clear about, some of what I heard this morning. The project was deemed a public utility by these commissions, just like the Amerons and the Evergys of the world. This is a public utility building this transmission line through these states. Next slide. So starting at a macro level and coming to the meat of our economic development discussion, through an agreement with the Missouri Joint Municipal Electricity Utility Commission, or MUJMUC, because that's a very long name, Missouri ratepayers in 39 cities are already expected to save $12.8 million annually on their electricity costs. To the right is a map that shows how these savings will be felt all across the state of Missouri. They are not focused in just one area, they're spread across the state, across many different cities. And as you can see from the table of the top 10 cities by savings, some of these smaller cities are looking at over $1 million in electricity savings a year. So this is a significant savings for these utilities and for their customers. In addition, what we've heard from many of the Missouri stakeholders since Invenergy became involved in the project in 2018 is that Missouri wants more of the power. 500 megawatts is not enough. So through our existing regulatory approvals, we've committed to building a converter station that's capable of delivering at least 500 megawatts from the project to Missouri. Earlier this year, we asked an independent third-party consultant called PA Consulting to run a study to determine the economic feasibility of delivering at least half of the power to Missouri. That study showed that not only was this economically feasible, but with expanded delivery to Missouri, Grainbelt could deliver Missouri IOU customers billions of dollars in electricity savings over the next 20 years. So I would encourage folks to go to our website where the study overview is posted to review the results, but we felt that was pretty stunning. Of course, to the extent we needed to alter the design of the project to allow for this expanded delivery, including enlarging the converter station, we would have to go back to the KCC and the Missouri Public Service Commission for approval. I think most folks know that one of the largest costs that commercial and industrial customers shoulder is their energy cost. So we know that access to low-cost energy is a way for Missouri to attract new energy-intensive businesses like manufacturing and data centers, which is where we're seeing a lot of economic growth now. In addition, many commercial customers also have sustainability goals, and getting access to low-cost energy that is also renewable is another carrot to expand existing or attract new businesses to set up shop in Missouri. So there are a number of companies with sustainability goals that have already, established a presence in Missouri. 3M, Cargill, Dow, General Mills, GM, IKEA, Microsoft, Nestle, Nike, Procter & Gamble. I mean, I could go on and on and on. So this is an incredible economic development tool for the state. Next slide. But it's about more than just energy cost savings for Missouri. Our third-party consultant, Strategic Economic Research, that did the economic impact analysis that served as the basis for our approvals at the Missouri Public Service Commission, reran that economic impact analysis for the project, assuming this increased delivery in the state. And the outcome is a significant increase in the total investment in Missouri, $1.25 billion in investment, as well as an increase in jobs. So here you see the direct, indirect, and induced jobs expected over the 3-year construction period is 2,500 jobs on an annual basis. So a massive amount of work expected when this project starts construction, and $250 million in worker earnings on an annual basis over this 3-year period, which of course will end up going back into the Missouri economy. In addition, we would expect 220 direct, indirect, and induced permanent jobs once the project is operational, with an additional 15 million in annual worker earnings for the life of the project. So just for clarity, when I say direct jobs, those are workers directly involved in the construction and maintenance of the project. Indirect jobs are supported through supply chain purchases for materials like wire, steel, and aggregate that are sourced through the state. And induced jobs are those jobs that result from higher spending from direct and indirect workers. Next slide. So at the more micro county and landowner level, landowners along the route in Missouri will receive $35 million in landowner payments, which is critical at a time when commodity prices are low and people may be experiencing economic hardship due to coronavirus-related impacts on the economy. And just to be clear here, just based on what I heard this morning, the project is seeking an easement from landowners, and an easement does not grant the company any ownership of the land. Landowners retain full ownership of their land and can continue to use the land and the easement in any manner that does not interfere with the safe construction and operation of the transmission line. So I want to make sure we don't characterize this or mischaracterize this as the company taking away folks' property. In addition, the compensation structure for the easements is more generous than what has historically been offered for similar easements in Missouri. So state budgets are tight right now. I think that's happening across the country, but during construction, Grainbelt will pay approximately $25 million in sales and other taxes. And at the local level, Grainbelt will pay out $260 million in property taxes over the life of the project to counties, schools, ambulance districts, and road districts. So really important services that need adequate funding to serve their communities. Last but certainly not least, and I think this is starting to be kind of a theme today, we are required to install fiber optic cable on the line for our own communications purposes, but we've pledged to expand this fiber to create a broadband backbone infrastructure along the Grain Belt route. So then we would seek to partner with local ISPs to extend the service along that last mile. So we all know what a critical economic development tool broadband service can be, and many of the counties that Grain Belt is routed through are currently underserved. Added to that, you know, we're all doing a virtual meeting today, right? So remote work in schools become the norm. So it's clear more than ever how much this has become a critical service that Grain Belt can bring to project communities in Missouri. Next slide. So Invenergy started title work at the beginning of this year, and voluntary easement acquisition is currently underway in Kansas and Missouri, which we're really excited about. We do have land agents out in the field. Landowners have received their easement offers. Just like any other company that's operating during this time, we've had to be really careful about navigating safety protocols, making sure that we're keeping landowners safe as we're doing this work, and we're keeping our agents safe as well. So that slowed us down a little bit at the beginning of the year, but we've ramped it up since then. So that work is underway. In addition, engineering, design, and environmental field studies are ongoing so that we can hopefully begin site work in mid-2022 and bring the project online by the end of 2024. Next slide. So we are so glad to have the support of a number of organizations and companies across the project route, including labor, manufacturing, consumer advocates, the Kansas Farm Bureau, and others. And we're so excited about the positive economic impact the project will have on the state of Missouri. So that's all I have prepared for today, but I'd be happy to take any questions that folks have.
Thank you so much. Robert asked, would you comment on the natural resources and environmental impacts related to the project and how you plan to mitigate those?
Yeah, so just like any other large infrastructure project, we are required, like I said, to do environmental field studies. So we'll be assessing the potential impact on bats, wetlands, and cultural artifacts. And we'll be working with the SHPOs and other state and federal agencies that are required to review the potential impacts of the project on Missouri and the other states in the region.
Okay. Chuck Dale Dirks asks, what voltage is the DC transmission line?
600 kV.
Okay.
That's an easy answer.
And then do you know exactly where the converter stations will be?
Yeah, right now, under our approved route at the Missouri Public Service Commission, it's located in Rawls County.
Rawls County, is that what you said?
That's right.
Okay. Is there a federal regulator engaged in the project, overseeing it in any way?
Yeah, absolutely. So on the energy side, in terms of regulating the price that we charge for service, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission is certainly engaged. We will have to, once we negotiate our agreements with our off-takers, FERC actually has to approve each and every one of those agreements as being just and reasonable. So FERC has jurisdiction over the rates that are charged on the line. And then in addition to that, of course, we're working with the Army Corps of Engineers on the river crossings, and there are federal agencies that are involved in the environmental permitting aspect of the project as well.
Okay, great. There's a question that says, where are converter stations to be located in the PA study?
In the same location as in our approved Missouri Public Service Commission route.
Okay, great. Nice, quick, easy questions for you, right?
Yeah, the PA study just did an analysis of the impacts on the energy markets that Missouri sits in. Didn't do any impact on routing impacts of the expanded delivery in Missouri.
Okay. Is there a FERC license required?
So the project already has gotten approval from FERC to negotiate rates. So they have something called Negotiated Rate Authority. It's not just a clever name. And then, like I said, FERC will be required to approve any rates that we negotiate. So we have the authority to go out and negotiate them, and then FERC will review those agreements and also approve them, we hope.
Okay. So and I apologize if you had said this during your presentation there, but what are your thoughts on when you think you'll be starting to deliver power?
Yeah, so our goal is to have the project online by the end of 2024. Of course, like I said, COVID has impacted our development efforts just like many other businesses. But luckily, building things outside and doing construction work is pretty COVID proof. So we're still moving forward with all of our development efforts and keeping our eyes on that end of 2024 COD.
And have you done shovels in ground anywhere?
No, so we are actually not permitted to install any structures until we have received approvals from all 4 states. And in terms of shovels on the ground, I mean, the only thing that we would be doing now is there may be some digging required for environmental studies, but we'd be required to get permission from landowners for that.
Gotcha. And where do you think, what are the hurdles there in Illinois, or where do you think the projections for Illinois are?
So I'm really optimistic about Illinois. We have a couple different options. So as Chair Zalewski noted, there is an energy omnibus bill that is being created in the state in response to Governor Pritzker's 8 energy principles. We'll certainly be engaged in that process and looking for a fix to our regulatory hurdle that we have in the state right now. That's probably the cleanest path towards getting approval at the ICC. Again, we still need to present our case to the ICC, but being able to go and do that is a challenge right now. So the Illinois Supreme Court issued a decision a couple of years ago on a separate project, not on Grain Belt, saying that really only folks that own utility plant that is currently serving customers can apply for a certificate to build utility plant to serve customers, right? So it's sort of a chicken and egg problem. So we would be looking to fix that either through this energy omnibus bill, or potentially we could simply acquire a piece of utility plant from a muni or a co-op or some other entity in Illinois that is serving customers and use that as the basis to qualify us to go back to the ICC and seek our CPCN, it's called there, our Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity. That's certainly a riskier route. There's no telling what will be acceptable to the ICC and to the courts. So, a legislative change is certainly a cleaner way to accomplish that. But like I said, we have lots of options open to us, and we're really optimistic about moving forward with that in 2021.
Great. Kim Goodnight asks, are you required to work with incumbent utilities, or in the other states? You've talked about the municipal utilities in Missouri. How are you working with incumbent utilities?
So we obviously cannot force our project on anyone, right? So the incumbent utilities are certainly the folks we're talking to about taking service on the project, but they have to really carefully weigh their options, right? Does it make more sense for their ratepayers or for reliability for them to have locally sourced projects versus taking power off of Grain Belt? They have an IRP process that they go through. So we're certainly engaged in that process in Missouri, talking to them about how we think the project could fit into their plans for decarbonization, which I think we heard is something that the Missouri utilities are thinking very seriously about. Aside from that, of course, we have to coordinate with them anytime our facilities cross from a construction standpoint, but that would probably be about it in terms of coordination.
Okay. The studies that you mentioned, are they available online?
Yes, they are. The PA study is available on our website. The study regarding the economic impacts, we don't know that that's been posted to our website yet, although I'm certain it will be. The preliminary study that assessed the economic impact of the project prior to the expanded delivery, that's posted on the Commission's website, and that's publicly available.
On the Commission's website. Okay. And do these studies include models and that type of stuff?
Yes, so the PA study, I think that's posted to the website right now, is just a general overview, although we'd certainly be glad to speak with folks about the detailed study, which we obviously would file if we were to move forward with this at any commission that we're assessing those economic impacts as a part of a CCN or CCN amendment. Sorry, what was the question there, Josh? If there are detailed studies?
They were just wondering, I think if I read the question right, if there were models and not just the end answer, but the models also included.
Yeah, and then for the economic impact study, I know that strategic economics used in plan. So that's a pretty standard economic impact analysis tool that folks use to assess the economic impact of large infrastructure projects.
Okay. Well, Nicole, it's great to see an opportunity. The expansion, more delivery to Missouri is always good. Always good to see the connection with Missouri companies. And as Director Dixon mentioned, our interest in expanding broadband and serving that, and you willing and to play a role in that. So thank you very much for coming today. A lot of good, interesting new information. So thank you again. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks again for the opportunity, Josh.
Absolutely. Our